welcome to another episode of the Rhode Island Small Business Coalition's Small Business Forum. I'm your host, Dave Dadekian, a small business owner here in Rhode Island. I own Eat, Drink, Rhode Island. And with us today is one of the Democratic candidates for Lieutenant Governor for the state of Rhode Island. Welcome to the forum, Khamsyvoravong. How are you?
I'm great, and you absolutely nailed the name, but you can just call me Cy, like Sigh of Relief. It's not the full name. Thanks so much, Dave.
I appreciate that. Newport City Council person and now running for Lieutenant Governor of the great state of Rhode Island. Tell us a little about yourself. Tell the folks out there your background.
Absolutely. I was born, raised, and educated right here in Rhode Island. Originally up in the Providence area, moved down to Newport in the midst of the pandemic, ran for city council here, and got selected to serve as mayor of the city for a couple years. Since then, I've been serving on the governor's workforce board, but just the latest chapters in public service that I have over the course of a career of being civically engaged.
Fantastic. Yeah, I know you've had a brief but long in many ways career in public service, which is fantastic. So tell us first of all, I think the biggest question is obviously why Lieutenant Governor? Why do you want to run for that office? Why are you running for that office? And why do you think you'd be the best choice?
I think that we need an urgent amount of change right now in this state. What we're seeing happening out there in the workforce that we interact with every single day in our communities is that a lot of the challenges that we're all facing aren't being addressed quickly enough by government. We really need a new generation of leaders that have both the background and experience to bring about change, but also who have that sense of urgency that change needs to happen now and that we can't keep waiting to address many of these big challenges that we're facing.
It makes perfect sense. I think we're seeing it every day. Obviously, the news is relentless in many ways, and change does need to happen faster. You're right. Our process isn't exactly the quickest in many ways, but hopefully, we're seeing some examples around the country that may be able to lead us. So, you were a city council person in Newport for how long?
I've been a council person for 4 years now. 2 of those years I spent serving as mayor. Yep.
That's right.
And that service comes off of having previously chaired Providence Water, the largest drinking water utility in the state for nearly a decade, where we really focused a lot on modernizing government so it could meet the challenges that we're facing right now.
Excellent. And how do your time there in Newport? What changes have you seen there? What have you been able to do there? Specific to small business, specific to what our forum is about.
Yeah, a lot of the work that we were focused on here was continuing to support the local economy that we have by making improvements to the infrastructure they rely on every single day, ensuring that city services were delivering quickly, and also making sure that this continues to be a place where families can afford to live. During the term that I was mayor, we lowered taxes every single year for working and middle class families in Newport. That was very important because many of those families are the small business owners that power our economy here in Newport. If you ever come down to visit, you'll notice that there's a huge diversity of the types of businesses that we have. Everything from absolutely marquee hotels to small restaurants to small artisans and crafts. And so you can really see a well-blended and well-diversified economy functioning here quite well. But we're facing the same types of challenges that businesses face across the entire rest of the state. Issues with accessing a workforce that is able to do their jobs on a day-to-day basis without having to be jammed up by the things that families have to navigate every day, like access to healthcare. We're very focused on ensuring that our school system here continues to be a place that affords the level of education and prep that the future upcoming workforce needs in order to be successful in the economy. And we're dealing with the realities of things like climate change and rising sea levels that pose enormous challenges to a community like Newport, making sure we can make the investments in our infrastructure that we need so that in the future, those businesses are able to continue operating and thriving. Great example of this is if you come downtown to Bowen's Wharf at any point during a high tide, you'll notice that the water runs right up and over those waterfalls during a king tide. We're working on making sure that we start to rebuild that waterfront infrastructure in a way that makes sure that small businesses aren't stuck footing the bill.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been, these are the not so exciting topics that we definitely discuss here all the time. Infrastructure, workforce, they're vital to what small businesses need. And we've seen, especially I think, here in Rhode Island, because we are the ocean state, some good progress with some of the climate issues, especially for sea level rise. But probably not enough. I know we've discussed this what they're doing in Warren on the show before. They're really even trying to move the entire the second main street, not the actual main street, which is 114, but the Water Street in a little ways. And these types of things are really going to affect small businesses, and it's great to hear that there's some perspective and thinking about how it shouldn't burden those small businesses, especially when they're not the property owner, which is most small businesses aren't.
Right. And that's, you're starting to look at the strategies we talked about with climate change, adapt, rebuild, or retreat. And you have to
Yeah.
decide where within that mix we're going to end up falling. In Newport, we know that we need to make substantial improvements to a lot of the seawalls and the walkways and the dock infrastructure that we have that helps ensure a lot of those businesses continue to be able to operate down here and have that historic waterfront charm that is so much part of Newport's character. What we did here in Newport was pretty unique in terms of how we're paying for that. We figured out that we were substantially below the market rate for the cruise ship fees that are charged. This is the per passenger
Oh yeah.
fee that's charged when people land and depart. And so we went about making sure that we increase those fees to the market rate. That's now helping us pay for those waterfront improvements that we are trying to make. That's how we're ensuring that businesses and working families in Newport aren't stuck footing the bill on that. But I can tell you that while a lot of those changes that we can make at the local level are going to be delivering results over the next few years, it's the state level issues that we found are absolutely crushing small businesses,
Yeah.
right? On the one hand, that workforce shortages are driving up the cost of construction. And the irony here is that a lot of those jobs in the trades themselves, those are great middle class jobs. Those are
Oh
jobs
yeah.
that pay a working wage, that provide health insurance. And so ensuring that we continue to feed that talent pipeline is important, not only to ensuring that businesses can keep expanding, that we can keep building homes, but also ensuring that the folks in the state who live and work here can actually afford to live and work here. The best way to address affordability is for us to actually increase incomes to help people climb that ladder of success that my family had the opportunity to when they first came here. The second thing that we're seeing a lot, though, is healthcare, right?
Yeah.
And healthcare expenses and access to healthcare are absolutely crushing for small businesses in this state. We know that double-digit increases in premiums are forcing a lot of companies and businesses to look at whether or not they can continue offering health insurance to their employees. That in turn impacts their access to healthcare, and that drives the productivity they have every single day. That's a huge concern. We saw this down here in Newport when they went to close the labor and delivery unit at our local hospital.
Right.
We pushed back successfully. We need to start making sure that health insurance and healthcare providers and the industry as a whole are focusing on the bread and butter basics that most of us rely on a day-to-day basis. We know that's at a breaking point. We've got to stay focused on fixing the system.
Well, Newport is an interesting correlation to the rest of the state because it is extremely vast diversity in the population there in Newport. I mean, people think of Newport from outside the area, and they think of, like you mentioned, all the tourist infrastructure and the mansions and luxury hotels and things of that nature. But there's also a huge population of workers and small business owners there, and that stretches across the state. That's very similar. I think it's an interesting dichotomy with a couple of issues you just brought up. And a lot of small business owners understand that they want to pay their workers a living wage and want to try and pay them as much as they possibly can. At the same time, they're hamstrung in many cases with their own income to do so. So there's always been that push pull with the minimum wage. But healthcare, I mean, without a doubt, we have a whole broken system here in this country. I'm not going to get too involved into that. That's a huge rabbit hole. But if there's any changes that can be adapted there for Rhode Island, I think would certainly be a benefit for small businesses.
Yeah, look, I grew up. My mother was a small business owner. Her business was a pediatric practice, right? And so I saw how hard she had to work every single day to keep that practice afloat, keep it operating. And what I watched over time was how quickly that industry devolved into being heavily focused on the processing of insurance claims. The amount of
Yeah.
paperwork that we're asking primary care physicians to do is drowning them. And in addition to that, you have them carrying enormous patient loads. So it's increasingly challenging for primary care physicians in this state to look at what they're doing on a day-to-day basis and say this is a practice, is something that makes sense and that is fair. When you combine that with the fact that our reimbursement rates are nearly 30% lower than that in Connecticut and Massachusetts, it is driving a massive shortage in the
Yeah.
providers that we have. We know that we're about 300 providers short across the state. We also know that over 1 in 4 providers are over the age of 55. That means in the next 5 to 10 years, there's a 1 in 4 chance that you're going to be losing your primary care physician. And the problem is that there's nobody behind them to fill in. Historically, that number was about 10% of the population, that we are rapidly accelerating to 1 in 4, soon to be 1 in 3 doctors retiring. You should be asking yourself, if I didn't have my primary care physician, where would I be going? That's a major problem because the answer to that is to an urgent care center or to an emergency room, which is massively, massively driving up the cost of our health insurance. If we want to start tackling the health insurance and the healthcare crisis, we need to start by focusing on primary care. This is a manageable task. We can do this, right? You mentioned electric boat and the kind of lead into all of this, right? We know electric boat is hiring thousands of new employees every year. If
Yeah.
we can't figure out how to get 300 new primary care physicians to help alleviate some of the crisis and the crunch here, I don't know what we're doing.
No, it's an excellent point. I think, a lot of our members, it's one of the things we hear from a lot of our members, it just on a personal level is that they've lost their primary care physician, let alone, their employees.
Yeah.
We hear that all the time. But, let's talk about, as lieutenant governor, how do you see a way to help and affect some of these things?
Yeah, well, workforce, workforce, workforce. I think that the next governor is going to hopefully look at their lieutenant governor and say, this is somebody who is smart, who is well equipped, and who has a track record of taking on tough fights and winning and solving problems. And that they will assign them essentially as their deputy to go out there and tackle a couple of these issues. I would argue that workforce sits at the crossroads of many of the affordability and access challenges that we're having today. We talked about the healthcare space, right? One of the things I think we should be doing is looking at loan forgiveness. We know that if you need about 300 primary care physicians in the state, that's a limited universe of folks that need loan forgiveness, probably an annual tab of, my guess is less than $10 million. We can figure that out, right? That's a manageable sum we can sort through. And when you consider the fact that most of us, when we go to the doctor these days, are having to take a quarter to a third of a day out of work, that is a productivity increase that I think is well worth the investment for our state. Second, you look at the shortages that we have in the building trades right now. We know that the cost of construction is very high here, and that impacts everything from whether or not you can expand your business to whether or not your employees have affordable housing that they can access, attainable housing they can access. Best way for us to do that is to be increasing our use of the trades programs, the pipelines that we're building, workforce training to ensure we have the workforce that we need. And then the final piece of all of this is we have to be realistic about the impact of AI that's on the horizon right
Yeah,
now. We need to be
I was going to
forward
bring that
looking.
up. I'm glad you did. Yeah.
Yeah, what offshoring did to our manufacturing industry, and I grew up in a family where my aunts and uncles and relatives, they worked in those factories where the work got offshore. They lost their jobs. I watched how painful and destabilizing that was to their pathway to the American dream. We have to be thinking about the ways in which we can take the lessons that we learned from the disruption caused by the offshoring of manufacturing to look at what AI is expected to do to industries in Rhode Island that relate to that. Nearly 30,000 jobs in Rhode Island have a high level of exposure to being disrupted by AI. And these aren't jobs that you might typically think of. Many of these jobs are, middle class, white collar jobs,
Yeah.
jobs working on the back office end of things that are going to be disrupted. We need to think about how we pivot quickly to adapt to that change. And we're a small enough state that that's something that we should be able to do.
Absolutely. I mean, we've discussed AI a lot here on the show. Our chairperson, the coalition's chairperson, Chris Parisi, is on the task force, the AI task force.
Mhm.
We'll be talking with Representative former Congressman Langevin about this as well. But I think a lot of times people say AI and they think about the chats and the everything there. But I like to think of it more as a global technology change,
Mhm.
more so like sort of like the internet or radio or television. These other massive changes that have happened over the years. And to your point, think about robotics and things of that nature. There are a lot of things can be replaced. Trades probably not so much. It's definitely an area where we see less input of technology, especially in my world of hospitality. There are certainly uses for AI, but not as much as the actual person to person relation. But what do you see? How do you see? Because you've been on the governor's workforce board. How do you see it affecting small business owners? Not so much the employees, but the owners themselves.
Yeah, a lot of the back office functions that you rely on, I think, could be improved through the use of AI,
Yeah.
but you've got to adapt quickly to that because I think that you're going to see AI in turn looking at how small businesses operate and where there are opportunities for potentially them to step into that space. What I would recommend is taking advantage of one of the programs that we have at the Workforce Board right now. We have a program called Work Immersion. The Governor's Workforce Board. It covers up to 75% of the compensation that you provide to somebody who is looking to get exposure and experience in your business. So think of high school students or college students that might be looking for an opportunity. I want you to think back to 10 years ago when a high school intern might have showed up at your small business and said, I want to work for you this summer and I want to do social media. And the business owner might have looked at them and said, I've got the Facebook. Like, what do you mean social media? And they said, no, I want to help you with your social media. And they might have waved it off, right? I would argue that the way that you thought about social media and what ended up happening is probably what's rapidly going to happen with AI. We know that young people are very interested and very focused on applications for AI. We should be embracing and leaning into how we can give them work exposure to see where that also might benefit our businesses. So I would love to see a version of work immersion that takes full advantage of AI and says, yes, we would love to have you come work with us for the summer. We're going to ask you to do some of the typical work that we ask our employees to do here, but we also want you to look at how we might be able to be implementing AI in our offices. This is technology that these young people are growing up using on a day to day basis in their lives. We've got to be leveraging that creativity and innovation at our businesses to think about how we prepare for the future and to get them interested and engaged in working in our businesses and seeing a pathway for themselves.
Absolutely. One more topic I wanted to bring up, which has been very much in the conversation with our small business owners and our members the last few months is utility rates.
Mhm.
It's been probably the number one issue for most small business owners right now. I mean, thankfully, we're coming out of the winter, but still, it's been a huge issue. What are your thoughts there? Again, as a lieutenant governor, what do you think can be done? With not just electricity, but everything that's coming down the pike now. I mean, water, gas, oil, everything.
Yeah, look, I chaired Providence Water for nearly a decade. That utility proudly has one of the lowest regulated water utility rates in the entire state. Uh, and we did that while also modernizing that utility, moving it into a new headquarters, ensuring that we had the first cybersecurity workforce, and taking an aggressive approach to lead service line replacement and ensuring high drinking water quality. One of the ways that we did that was by embracing technology to help us lower our utility costs. As a utility itself, we still consume a lot of electricity, right? Those pump stations, moving water around, treating it, that takes a lot of energy.
Yeah.
What we ended up doing was actually fully embracing solar on our rooftops and on existing open space. The net benefit at the end of the day of us moving the utility to being entirely solar powered was to help us reduce our annual electricity costs by nearly $1 million per year. So when we start embracing a lot of these renewable energy technologies that have enormous potential, we need to be making sure that that pencils out at the bottom line. I'll be honest with you, right? I look at the utility bill that we get every month, and I've got two Ivy League degrees and a law degree, and it takes me a while to figure out exactly what's baked into that bill. I think we need a higher level of transparency as to what we're paying for, but I also think we as a state need to be leaning into any opportunity we have to reduce energy consumption and to increase the number of options that we have for where energy is getting generated. That I think is our best pathway forward, but we are looking down the barrel of absolutely brutal rate increases until we all embrace that, lean into it, and really start thinking about what makes some common sense.
That's excellent points. Thank you. And I think we've discussed the wind energy and solar on the show before. Those are also in many cases small business owners. Some are larger. Obviously, the bigger projects off the coast are much larger corporations, but a lot of those businesses are small business owners, and there are pathways to it, especially through some of the commerce programs and everything that can really be helpful to people. So we'll make sure we link up all those things you're talking about down below. We'll link up your website and social media and all that. Anything else you want to add? Anything else we didn't touch on today that you want to talk about before we go?
I do think it's worth touching on the concept of resiliency and sustainability. One of the things we did when I was serving as mayor was we completely reorganized city government into three major departments, one of which was resiliency and sustainability. I say resiliency and sustainability because it is a two-part equation.
Yeah.
We need to be making sure that everything that we build or everything that we start to take on in our communities isn't just something that's going to be here for the next generation from a resiliency perspective, but it's something that we as the upcoming generation can continue to afford and pay for and cover the cost of. That's why our planning department, our zoning department, our public works, our public utilities, every major department that builds anything feeds through that chief resiliency and sustainability officer in our city. That's the type of realignment that government needs to ensure that when we're making these investments in the future, when we're embracing things like doing our part on climate change, that we're doing it in a way that still allow average Rhode Island families to get by on a day-to-day basis and have a better future ahead.
Thank you. Well said. It's an excellent point. Certainly in the in the food and drink world, sustainability is something we've been striving for years and years. So it's nice to hear it, communicated in the government level as well. Newport City Councilperson Khamsyvoravong, thank you very much for being with us today. We really appreciate it. He's running for lieutenant governor. The primary for lieutenant governor, the Democratic primary, it's looking like September 9th this year. We'll update, make sure the information is down below. It was supposed to be September 8th, but it's looking like the General Assembly might move it to the 9th because of Labor Day this year. So just pay attention for your primary if you're a registered Democrat or if you're disaffiliated, and make sure you vote in the primary. Cy, thank you very much. We appreciate your time.
Thank you very much, David. Take care.
You too. Thanks as always for watching. I hope you've found that very interesting. I certainly did. It was a great conversation for me to have. I enjoyed it, and we'll make sure we link up all that information down below. We always would like a subscribe, a comment, a like, all those things on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts, a rating. And until next time, thank you for watching and take care.